everyone. Welcome to the lecture series of WIGO Smart City Champions. I'm Hanna Yoon, professor at the School of Creative Arts of Sungsil University. I'm also the founder of a global young leadership education courses that collaborates with UN agencies, including UNFPA, Interpress Service, WHO, IPPF, and the Forum of Asia, Arab, and Africa Parliaments. Therefore, I think it is very valuable to establish a curriculum for young people to think about the future of the city. Through the lecture series of WIGO Smart City Champions, I hope that each and every one of you will be pressed to think about sustainable city development as a future leader. Now, let me introduce today's lecturer. I'm very honored to introduce Dr. Alexander Hestas. Alexander is the Director of the Global Environmental Policy Program, University of Geneva, and the Senior Lecturer of Institute for Environmental Sciences. Alexander started his research career on the financing of urban infrastructures and public-private governance, which contributed to the final documents of OECD's Conference for Partnership in the 21st Century. Also, Alexander is one of the advisors of WIGO Smart City as me. The lecture's topic is urban retrofitting for greater resilience. He has taught on comparative politics, regionalization, and urban development, bringing scholars and practitioners to explore and discuss the nexus of development, security, and the environment on various courses. So, these important viewpoints could learn through the lecture. I hope that you will be able to learn from various perspectives and diversity what is necessary for the formation of a city in the future. Please welcome with applause, Dr. Alexander.
Hello, I'm Alexander Hijazi from University of Geneva and delighted to share with you a few insights and knowledge on urban retrofitting for greater resilience and how nature-based solutions are emerging as one of the leading strategies with cities to not only move ahead with sustainability agenda from environmental, social, and economic point of view, but also boost their resilience and their capacity to resist shocks, function during the shocks, and build better. The lecture today is going to be along these 6 parts. First, we'll go into the understanding of the context, how both increasing and speeding urbanization and climate change are happening at the same time and create a very new environment for cities to develop and to grow. The second part will be dedicated to the paradigm shift, how we read cities, understand cities, live in cities, are based on different concepts, and it started from the sanitary city in the late 19th century and 20th century to the ecological and regenerative cities. These different ways of understanding urban living and urban growth have impacted our cities very strongly. The third part will be on biophilic design and production of co-benefits through greening strategies. I will be coming back in more detail on those greening strategies and what are those co-benefits that we would want to see more often in our sustainable cities. The fourth part is on the mitigation strategies and urban infrastructure integration, how through integrating the infrastructures such as transportation and energy infrastructures, we can reduce our negative impacts of our cities on the environment. The fifth part is on urban growth and ecosystem retrofitting patterns, taking stock of some of the projects in Switzerland and in Geneva with the revitalization of the watershed and urban wetlands, try to see how this can accompany urban growth in a way that it's not impacting negatively the environment while developing an environment for the population for better living, urban living. And obviously, the last part will be the take-home message. So without further ado, let's start with these two contexts that I just mentioned, these two elements of the context. One is obviously urbanization, and the other one is climate change. In regards to urbanization, we need to acknowledge that the 20th and 21st century have witnessed urban growth. First of all, in terms of regardless of the negative impacts on the natural resources and the environment, and just try to move ahead with the growth needs. There has been little reflection paid on the well-being of the population, quality of urban space, which is public spaces, and the balance between the built environment and natural environment, between the implementation of new technologies and culture, and all those elements that come together in urban life. But there's also an understanding increasingly that cities are for vegetal and animal species, for living species, including human beings, not only for cars and buildings and the built environment. What we see increasingly labeled as desirable by the population is a walkable city. We have, those compact walkable cities in Europe, but also elsewhere in Asia. Milan, Barcelona, Paris, to some degree Singapore are very good examples of those cities where people can move around, can use public spaces, where there is urban mixity, mixed use between retail, housing, and business, that makes cities obviously more sustainable, desirable, elegant, and enduring, with an environment that is prone for human and living species development. The second part of this context is obviously climate change. There is an overwhelming consensus that climate change is a reality of the planet, across the planet. All cities are impacted by climate change. And if we want really to open up the climate change in terms of its impact, it's extreme weather events. So it's flooding, drought, heat and cold wave periods, hurricanes, tornadoes, typhoons in greater frequency, irregular in terms of their seasonality, and are increasing in both intensity and frequency, obviously as a result of climate change. So adaptation to climate change, but also mitigation of urbanization's negative impact, which is reduction and decrease of the urbanization negative impacts on the environment, are major concerns, not only at the national level, but also and predominantly at the local level and at the cities level, municipalities level, regional government levels. That's where the most of the impact needs to be dealt with. Continuing urbanization is also posing severe health threats through increased water, air, and noise pollution, and obviously reducing urban life quality. And as you can see on the lower picture, this is a smog day in Santiago de Chile, the capital city of Chile, and we see these episodes of pollution in winter times across the planet, but also in summer times. And this is a testimony of how urbanization is affecting our livelihood and well-being. It is also important to acknowledge that the current practice of planning, be it for new developments, new developed areas, or retrofitting the existing ones, have been increasingly failing to address a great number of cross-sectoral interactions that need to be addressed to reduce these externalities, to improve the living environment for the population, and to develop greater resilience. And I encourage you to follow the link that I have here on some of the best examples of how cities are trying to cut carbon emissions and CO2 emissions towards that goal, which is the improvement of the urban life quality. The compounding effect of urbanization and climate change cannot be more staggering. Obviously, we have tremendous pressure on local natural environment and natural resources. The lower picture shows you a episode of drought, where extensive droughts across different parts of the world obviously pushes cities to deplete the whatever little soft water credit they have and is at their disposal. And this obviously put a huge pressure on the renewal of these resources. The compounding element is which climate change and urbanization is obviously affecting the water supply, as well as other natural resources that also participate in the food system. Soil, for example, is a very good illustration of how our most fundamental element for our survival, which is water, but also the food system, can be negatively impacted by the compounding effect of urbanization and climate change. There's also greater challenges for some of the public services and public infrastructures. Water and waste treatment, the sewage system are heavily challenged due to greater volume of waste and irregularity of waste. And some of the heavy rains, unseasonal rains that our cities have been witnessing also affects that because of the rainwater runway and all the extra amount of water that needs to be processed and overwhelm the treatment facilities. Greater increase in greenhouse emissions is also part of that vicious circle or compounding effect of urbanization, which is accompanied by greater number of fossil fuel based cars and transportation that is based on fossil fuel, and therefore greater greenhouse gas emissions. Decreasing water and air quality. It's not only about quantity, it's also about quality is also very important as a result of these convergence of urbanization and climate change, as well as I was saying earlier, acceleration of land and soil degradation, which clearly affects the livelihood of people through the food system, but not only, it's also about the land recession and receding parts of the cities. You see these big holes that open up, and this is because of the soil degradation also. There's also obviously acceleration of biodiversity. The more we build, the more we concrete, the more we use asphalt, we push further natural species, vegetal and animal outside the cities, and biodiversity loss has reached unparalleled level across cities in the world, and also the natural spaces that goes hand in hand with the biodiversity loss. And obviously, as a result of all this, we also have the social dimension, which is greater inequalities in face of public services and public goods that are more and more needed. It's not only about the supply of water and electricity, it's about all the elements that we as one single community, urban community, need to have equal access. Well, in times of scarcity, those who have more means will be more advantaged than those who don't, especially in situations where elements of public good and state interventions are less abundant. This brings us to what I wanted to show you. It's a satellite shot of the landfall of Hurricane Sandy a few years ago in North America and how it affected a huge area that has been urbanized, one of the most urbanized areas in the US, Eastern Seaboard, which basically covers 24 states in the US. And here you see the catastrophic kind of conjuncture between urbanization and climate change. If these extreme weather events occur in a place, in an area that is highly urbanized, you can imagine that casualties and all sorts of losses, economy, but also human life is at high risk and possible. So the increase in severe climate events plus wide-scale urban development imposes on us an urgent intervention, not only to drive sustainability agendas of the cities, but also to build resilience. What does resilience mean in this perspective? A very simple definition. It's the capacity of the cities to absorb shocks, such as this hurricane, function during the shocks, and recover from extreme disruption, such as those caused by natural disaster, pandemic, or rapid technological change, while developing better cities, better prepared cities, and systems that can improve as they go. This capacity is known as resilience, and it's increasingly developed as part of the overall sustainability agendas of cities. And people like Peter Edwards and Gabriela Wickler in their piece in 2020 really emphasized those elements very nicely. It's also important to understand that all we are living today is as a result of how we built our cities. And these, the cities that we designed, we are living today, are the result of the way we looked at them in the past. Starting from the sanitary cities. Sanitary cities were cities where all technical system and concern were for public health. You see on the upper photo, the Los Angeles River that was in the 30s concreted and transformed literally as a result of flooding situations, and to minimize flooding, it was transformed into a channel. And what you see today is void of any natural life. The river has a channel to maximize the flow of rainwater. In a very short amount of time, the rain ends up in the ocean with no contributions to the natural environment. And this is something that is becoming the general rule across the planet. What sanitary city meant at that time is to control and direct natural ecosystems outside the city. Natural ecosystems were considered as the threat. Think of European cities or Asian cities in the late 19th century, early 20th century. Waterborne diseases were associated, for example, to rivers and so on. So you can imagine that pushing these natural elements outside cities were considered as the most logical and urgent thing to do. So the mastery of ecosystems at that time was about flood prevention, development of water supplies, and sewage treatment. This brings us to a second reading or understanding the cities connected more with nature. That was the ecological cities, the garden cities of Ebenezer Howard, the first planning concept that truly brought town and countryside together, blending opportunities of town living with the aesthetics and some of the positive elements of natural elements. So it was trying to connect at some point urban living with the countryside living. And the garden cities were highly modular, symmetrical, urban structures of separated land use. So you had on one side housing, then you also had retail, business, and you name it. Incorporating natural features in the cities, something that Patrick Geddes, for example, did, was at the intersection between the human system of town planning and natural system of ecology, geomorphology. This understanding of the connection between built and natural environment didn't last long because of the scale of urbanization. And what you see on this photo, which is an aerial shot of Los Angeles, shows clearly that the 20th century urban development models were around and are still around in 21st century around cars. In parallel or next to the Los Angeles River that you see here, all concreted, it's a freeway and highway network that brings people from point A to point B with obviously organized and developed around individual cars and with encouragement of the use of fossil fuel that, as you know, contributes to climate change. The first studies on sustainability in cities showed that the low-density car-based suburbs, as the one that you see here in Los Angeles, were extremely high in resource consumption. So it's natural resources. Obviously, you can all have all sorts of understanding and explanations to that. Energy use is one of them. Fossil fuel for cars, for transport, but also for housing, and obviously difficulties to implement any energy efficiency strategy on these kind of models that are low density. A loss of urban populations, everyday interaction with nature is a #1 result of that. And us as human beings, we need this connection for our well-being, for our mental well-being, for our physical well-being with nature. And obviously, as you can see from this picture, and you can imagine if you zoom in to the level of the streets or neighborhoods, that interaction is reduced to a minimum. And obviously, this is something that human beings have been and the citizens have been looking to change and to alter. Cities are designed landscapes, human settlements typically sited and developed due to natural conditions. If we have a city by a river or on the footsteps of a mountain, it's because of the bioregional context. It's about the topography, it's about hydrology, soils, and so on. But as the cities have been growing, this artificial subsumes the natural. We build higher, more in elevation. There is a need to go further beyond the hydric and hydrologic basin and watersheds. And obviously, artificial takes over on natural. And there has been many calls for reconnection of cities and urban dwellers with nature. Anderson et al. In 2014, Samuelson, Golding, and Bartel in 2019 were among those who were very vocal about that. And there is another element that we need to understand is that the role of cities, the role that play in global challenges such as climate change, is at the forefront of our understanding of this interaction between cities and their natural environment. We need to make sure that cities can reduce and will reduce their negative impact on their environment, on their ecological, to reduce their ecological footprint, but also they reduce some of the other elements that contribute to the negative externalities and overall planetary boundaries that we have established. And authors like Folke, Johnson, Larson, and Costanza in 1997 really emphasized that element. So us planners, urban planners, city planners, are increasingly encouraged to ask at ways to integrate natural and built environments and to better integrate natural system in cities to reduce negative externalities and negative impacts on natural environment, but also to develop the resilience of the cities, to develop this capacity to resist the shocks, to absorb the shocks, to resist the shocks, and to function during the shocks, and to improve the models that we have. Newman and Jenkins are two authors that really emphasize this. And the photo that I have here is an illustration of a parklet in Geneva in Switzerland, where school courtyard was transformed into this neighborhood public space, where greenery is also part of the the block, and obviously creates an area which is permeable to water, to rain, can infiltrate rain into the water and break the monolithic concrete or asphalt or impermeabilized area that we had. So these elements of design are as a result of that reflection on how to reduce our externalities and create greater resilience. From there, we go to regenerative urbanism, and regenerative urbanism is aimed to reclaim or redress previous environmental and social damages. Regenerative urbanism is an integrated process that seeks to address energy, water, waste, food, and biodiversity benefits to any urban area and reduce social polarization, as well as obviously promoting equity and equal access. So I would like you to have this definition very close to you and look at it very carefully. The concept of regenerative cities has been developed as an urban planning paradigm that seeks not only to minimize ecological footprint, but also to regenerate nature. I would add to this definition by Brugman, Duplessis, and Girardet, also to regenerative cities helps us to reestablish, regenerate some of the social dynamics that were lost as a result of car-centered or car-focused urban development. This brings us to the third element or part of this presentation, and it's on biophilic design and production of co-benefits through greening strategies. Biophilic design has become a major grassroots and bottom-up movement within city policy and practice. There is more and more demand from the population and citizens to bring in nature in the city and to design the city in a way that it promotes the role of nature beyond the aesthetics. So biophilic city design elements across scales from building, block, streets, neighborhoods, community, and region have been at the heart of research. Bentley and Newman wrote about these elements, but it's also important for us to understand that biophilic design and urbanism has developed a series of new tools that cover natural and social sciences as well as engineering to connect the built and natural environment, such as bringing green rooftops, facades, quarries, and so on, while promoting better use of resources through mimicking natural features. Obviously, human beings, individuals, a population need to play an important role in this, not only from the conception and definition of the problems, but also on the design of the strategies and plans and projects, and to the use of those projects, the upkeep of those projects, how they evolve in time. And this is a new element in urban planning. So biophilic urbanism has been increasingly applied to the densest parts of cities. Obviously, the image that you have here that most of you know is in Seoul, the Cheonggincheon project. And this is something that many cities are trying to mimic, to follow as a very successful story of bringing back nature in the city for the use of the greater number of the population. It is based on the understanding that urban vegetation provides many ecosystem benefits, service for individuals, the community, and the nature. It contributes to the mental well-being of the population. It reduces the heat island phenomenon in the city and offers places to rest, relax, and recharge. It is the basis of the quality of our landscapes, our forests, our countryside, but also our neighborhoods and our streets. Obviously, the use of indigenous species allows distinct species of flora and fauna to find habitat. Those that were pushed outside the city come back, and also try to understand and to improve the food system and reproduce and concretize the long-term qualitative ecological objectives carried by the state and the city. Again, here I want you to follow this link that shows you how, for example, by bringing back nature in the city, urban vegetation, promoting urban vegetation, soil is becoming very central to this new understanding of cities, how soil is playing an important role in our well-being and not only livelihood with the food system, but even for its capacity to regenerate the city, its capacity to develop vegetations, contribute to greener area, and obviously some of the positive impacts on the environment, such as carbon capture, being sinks for some of the emissions and so on. So soil is extremely important in this perspective. The greening strategies are multiple, but I wanted to share with you 3 of them that I think are the most spread in terms of use. One is the case of the rooftops. More and more we see greening rooftops are based on very long tradition of recycled substrates that have been used to develop vegetation. The innovation today is to use recycled construction waste, whatever waste is produced in the city, including biochar, and try to use them to green the vacant spots, areas, spaces across cities. And obviously some of those spaces that are, I would say, low-hanging fruit in terms of realization and greening are the rooftops. But nevertheless, the questions that need to be addressed towards greening rooftops is about where are the vacant spaces in with the most capacity to have impacts? What are their hydric and structural potentials in this area? Which native plant species thrive on each of these substrates? Because our goal is to bring back native plants and not to import new ones, not to alter the existing dynamic, natural dynamic. And the last 2 questions is, how is their flowering taking place? Which insects are favored in this context by using those vegetation? So you see that we have a mix of questions that need to be addressed and answered before we can design those projects. And this requires the working of different group of experts from the natural sciences, from city planning, obviously, but also from the social sciences to come together with a common understanding of what is needed to be done and what are the interactions. The case of walls, greening walls and facades is different. Walls and facades are obviously everywhere in the cities. Wall greening, nevertheless, is less widespread than of rooftops that is booming. They have potential for improving biodiversity and quality of life and aesthetics of the city, but they're operating under more restrictive conditions. The techniques and potentially usable species are very different. So the questions here to be addressed is, what are the needs, what are their potential use, the potential use of these walls, are there important elements of structure of a city, like the old towns have these old big walls, or there are more of a design elements in cities. Which species and techniques need to be planted and participate in the greening of the facades and can contribute to the convincing results and impact. The third element of greening strategies is, has wide-scale impact because of the size and the scope is brownfields, and quarries. Urban greening experiments have been going on mineral substrates in quarries and brownfields, represent a great opportunity as the scale of intervention and return on investment seems to be much greater from the environmental point of view, as well as the well-being of the population. So here I want really to go to the core element of resilience building through infrastructure integration. And I have a photo, an aerial view of the city of Geneva, where you have an international airport very close to the city center and very close to the lake, natural environment, but and obviously participate heavily in urban economy and the accessibility of the city. Small city or mid-sized city of 300,000 with a goal to reach 100% renewable energy base in 2050. Historically, very localized and distributed decision-making process, home of 300 international organizations, one of the seats of global governance, including the United Nations. And in this context, the extension of the airport, and which was under capacity, was very important, and potential increase in air and noise pollution met decade-long resistance from neighboring communities with long legal battles. Air transport capacity is key, like anywhere else here in Geneva, to face urgent rescue, recovery, and assistance in case of shocks such as pandemics, natural disaster, as well as delivery of supply. So how do we go with the needed extension of the airport, its capacity to deliver its promise of transport for all sorts of purposes, but also being a place of urgent rescue, recovery, and assistance? It is important to understand that besides all sorts of negative externalities, greater amount of emissions, with more planes, there are more emissions, noise pollution, and so on, there has been a very strong resistance to development and extension of the airport until the local utility in Geneva, and you have a design, a diagram from this utility, which is Service Industriel de Genève, SIG, jumped in and brought into to this project of extension of the airport another project that they have, which is the cooling and the heating of some of the neighborhoods of Geneva with the water of the lake. The project is called Genilac, circular heat sinking system based on lake water at 45 meter, maintains 7 degrees stable temperature throughout the year. And you can imagine that in summertime, this is a cooling obvious impact and capacity. And in wintertime, with the heat pumps, it obviously reduces the consumption of energy. Originated by the state of Geneva, City of Geneva, and a few foundations, and designed to improve the cooling and heating capacity of the UN buildings. In 2016, Genilac evolved and scaled up to 10 times energy use, and aims at providing 114 megawatt by 2022 and CO2 reductions by 80%. And this project enabled the airport to move ahead to address some of the contestation and some of the resistance and protestation against its expansion, and try to come up with a new agenda of expansion of the airport with the use of this technique. And obviously, this was a success story. Here is what the project looks as of 2022, with the connection of the network of SIG to the airport, as well as in blue, you see the UN neighborhood, and in green, you see the banking neighborhood in Geneva. So this network is going beyond what it was designed to be, and enabled the airport to expand and build a new terminal. It addresses environmental predicaments, addresses social and cultural dimensions of an infrastructure, and addresses economic needs and opportunities. The first one on environmental predicaments, it's about water management, waste management, emissions, noise pollution, biodiversity, and energy management. You can imagine, without getting into the details of these elements, that by using the water of the lake for the cooling and heating purposes, you reduce carbon emissions, you reduce fossil fuel use that is needed for an expansion and a new terminal. But you also bring in new elements of connectivity from the social and cultural dimension, increase of precarious situations in spaces of transition, psychological stress that is associated to some of these elements of urban growth, continuous sponsorship of cultural activities, including space of cultural activities, that as a result of this new understanding of the role of transport and this infrastructure that participate in transport, create social cohesion instead of social polarization across the city, where you have different point of views that are always in conflict, but also social cohesions across age groups. And obviously the elements of data privacy and citizens' rights are also brought to this with the communication that have been done around the project, the data available, there's nothing to hide. So this also creates a positive environment with the population to discuss and to develop further the plans towards urban growth that is in harmony with the expectations of the population, but also with the requirements to reduce the negative impact of these infrastructures on their natural environment. Obviously, if the airport expands, it can also participate or continue participating in urban economy, creating new jobs or extending the existing ones, preventing loss of revenue, and dedicate more of income to some of the other elements of urban life, such as culture and so on. And based on the success story, this can also become a domino effect and become a role model for the city to promote in the future. So you see that all in all, it's been a success story just by integrating an energy infrastructure, which is this network that the local utility has developed, with the transport network that the airport represents. The fifth part of this presentation is about urban growth and ecosystem retrofitting, and how by revitalizing watersheds and wetlands, rivers, we can truly contribute to that sustainability agenda of the city, but also to creating greater resilience. I have an example of a river in Geneva, Switzerland, which is the Air River, and its ecological retrofitting project. The upper photo shows us the river turned into channel, like Los Angeles River, at a very different scale, it's a smaller scale, but nevertheless, the same model, concreted and void to great degree of natural life. And the lower picture shows us the retrofitting projects, the recreation of a riverbed next to the channel with this diamond shape design to reduce the flow of water so that the water meanders within these lozenges and bring little by little life with different species, animal and vegetal species, to this newly recreated or retrofitted river. It all started with the poor quality of the river natural environment and the loss of obvious biodiversity in the absence of natural habitat as a result of channelization that triggered later on the state of Geneva's launch of a revitalization program. The project covers an area of 4.5 kilometers long and 100 meters wide. And the organization of the work was based on different stages that enabled experimentation of many different methods. We need to understand in these situations, cities are becoming urban labs, living labs, where you experiment elements and you come up with a model that is adapted to local context. The superposition of multidisciplinary group composed of architects, hydraulic engineers, civil engineers, biologists, developed a completely new concept, enabling the river to choose its own course. And again, these diamond-shaped design and blocks show us how these different experts come together with a new mindset that move together towards the development of a new understanding of the intersection between the built environment and natural environment. Interestingly enough, as you can see on the lower photo, this river is between an agricultural area, and also a residential area. So it needs also to be the interface between residential and agriculture or natural area that are both needed for the livelihood, but also the well-being of the population. The important aspect here is to create a new space also, not only for the river to revive, but also for people to, for their recreation purposes, for the population to see this as space, as an urban space dedicated to their lives, and they take ownership of it. This area is also floodable, which means that in times of heavy rain, it can be flooded and prevents flooding in urban areas downstream. And again, this is one of the features of the project. As a result, you see here the river, the channel still exists. In some parts it's covered, and as you can see, the covered part of the channel has become a place that the population has taken ownership. These are picnic areas. People can do sports and use these areas on top of the channel, while the river meanders next to it across these lozenges that you saw on the design. Interestingly enough, you can also see that this whole area on the center photo can be flooded in times of heavy rain and prevents further flooding down the stream. And obviously what you see here on the third photo, nature is back with vegetation, amphibians, and birds and insects that recreate a natural environment that was lost. The second project that I wanted to share with you is what is named the Plage des Eaux Vives, which is basically a restoring lakeside wetland, new recreation areas, but also having in mind the importance of local economy. On this area, you see the aerial view before and after. Before you had concreted, built up lakeside, lakeshore, and on the lower photo, on the bigger photo, what you see is that this area has been further developed to host a wetland, beaches for population to take advantage of the lake, but also expanded the marina for the economy of the place, as well as a fishery for educative purposes. It's a 400 meters of beach in total, a park of 2 hectares of greenery. The beach is important to understand. The beach is built on field. Between 60 and 80 trucks per day deliver drugs extracted by various building sites of the canton. So not only we are using the urban and architectural waste and urban waste, but it's used also to develop a new area which is dedicated for to the environment, natural environment, but the leisure space for population. What was important here is to balance the minimized use of field so that you don't encroach on the lake, and the use of field is obviously needs to be reduced to the maximum by using stilts, not to disturb the natural lake dynamics and water flow, while expanding the recreation space for general public in the city. The triangle that you see in the lower side is reed bed that separates the road, the street, from the public beach, park, and the port. The pier that was also added hosts an all-glass bar and restaurant on stilts, again contributing to local economy, but it also hosts fish breeding from the lake for educational purposes, and the extension of the marina and the direct access to the lake obviously participated in the local economy for the improvement of local economy. And this is the result that you see. The end result is what we see from just one bank of the lake, which was all built. You see this new facade to the lake with beaches, with greenery, but also on the upper side, the triangle is a new wetland where some of the amphibians and birds and vegetation are coming back with all sorts of educative opportunities for the population, from the type of species that are back to the type of species that should not be added to these as being invasive species, such as the goldfish and so on. And the end result is staggering, from the absence of anything, and then the lower side, what you see also is all these build up towards the project. And this is what you see as a result of the project: a new area that did not exist over the lake, with greenery coming back and natural environment coming back. This is the area that is dedicated to nature in the city, a space reserved for wild nature in the city, but also an area dedicated to leisure. People come to the beach, take advantage of the lake, walk, and enjoy a new urban space that did not exist before, while giving a chance to nature to come back. And this is, again, an important element that these greening strategies are playing. These are accompanied with other strategies here in Geneva, from the expansion of the soft mobility and cycling paths across the city. We reduce the space dedicated to cars in the cities. We expand the corridors dedicated to bikes, while taking advantage of these projects to permeabilize what was before either paved, completely asphalted area, or in other ways by creating these new pavements where rainwater can go all the way down to the aquifer. And you see these educative panels explaining what the project's rationale is, and how the permeabilization of the pavement is also contributing to the biomass, the health of better health of the trees, and expand the biomass across the city. Overall, I would like you to take home these messages, and it is important to understand that what is at stake here. I go back to the final slide, which I think summarizes well all the elements of this discussion, is the importance of the new understanding of the role played by the natural environment, and the fact that conceptualizing the city and its infrastructure, including the water urban system that we call blue assets, and vegetated areas that we can call green assets, as a living ecosystem, is transforming the existence divided between cities and environment into an integrated approach of nature-based blue-green solutions. What is also important for us to understand is the rethinking of the urban cycle of water, materials, and energy, and embedding nature-based solutions into city infrastructures introduces innovative master planning strategies that will not only improve its overall water and climate resilience, but also result in significantly improved quality of urban life for the population. By reshaping the built environment and bringing back natural environment in the city, nature-based solutions can optimize urban biodiversity, create new sponge floodable spaces and carbon sequestration capacity for urban biomass, encourage soft mobility, walking, biking, public transport, develop urban circular economy, reinforce social inclusivity, improve equitability and livability of cities, regenerate deprived districts, improve mental and physical health and quality of life for the citizens, while reducing urban violence and decrease social tensions. And on that note, I would like to thank you for your attention, encourage you to go further in your investigation of nature-based solutions and how they participate in reconnecting the built environment and natural environment, while creating greater resilience and optimizing resilience of the city. Thank you very much and hope to see you soon.